Shelly Strachan, welcome to Over the Bonnet.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
You've been described as one of the most influential people in Gympie. You've gone up the ladder. How does that feel?
Strange. I'm a Gympie girl. Grew up here, farmer's daughter. And just, I was going to be a writer or a journalist always from the minute I first laid eyes on my first book. And I think it's a lot easier to make a living in journalism than it is to be a writer. So, I've made my career at the Gimpy Times because I love the Gimpy Times. And I just do my job, and I'm a perfectionist, and I try and do it, I guess, like everybody, the absolute best job I can do.
Let's talk about the early days in journalism and how that unfolded for you. Why print?
Because I love writing. I've always been a good writer. I was a straight A student in English. Couldn't read enough books as a child from a very early age. So went to uni and did a Bachelor of Arts majoring in journalism, and just never even considered any other medium. I was always going to be a writer. I was either going to write novels or write news. So, like I said, it's easier to earn a living being employed by a newspaper than to write books.
It was interesting as a young man, as a young boy, I should say. I was playing with records and wanted to get into radio from a very early age. So I think it's intrinsically in the system.
Yes, I've just loved it. Mind you, I'd had a few years before I settled into journalism. I went and did my nursing. Back then it was a certificate, wasn't a degree as well. So I worked as an RN for about a year and a half before I actually started a cadetship.
How did you enjoy that as a nurse?
It's funny, that was a profession where people love you and think you're the greatest and are very kind to you and say nice things because you're helping them and caring for them. Going from that to being one of the most despised professionals, I guess. Nursing was great. It pays well. I didn't like the hours, and I was a bit soft. Got affected by a couple of patients who passed away, and working with kids. And, it was just all a bit too much for me. It takes a very special person to be a nurse. You have to be hard, and yet you have to be kind and soft and caring and nurturing. But I didn't have enough hardness about me. It was all, I got upset a couple of times and just decided, no, I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life.
Do you think, though, as a journalist, that you do need to take that hardness? I know that what I've seen over my career as a television and radio journalist, and I've seen a lot, and I know it's affected a lot of people around me, and a lot of people get affected by it. How about yourself?
Yeah, do you mean like seeing traumatic things?
Absolutely.
As part of your job? Definitely. Definitely. That I had certainly in my first few years when you never sort of, you have to go to a fatal accident or one story I had to do was really terrible out this way, actually. And I can't remember the names of the people involved, but an older man who was a friend of the family was doing them a favour and chopping down some trees on their property at Widgie. And the little boy, the son, had ridden his motorbike out to take him morning tea, and the older fellow didn't realise the little boy was there, and he just kept chopping the trees, and a tree fell on the little boy and killed him. Just awful. And I just remember sitting there trying to interview this lovely man about what had happened, and he was just crying, and I was just crying, and we just cried the whole way through the interview, and that is tattooed on my brain, that story, except I can't remember the names. But and you just have to, I guess, suck it up. Definitely back then you just had to suck it up, and if you wanted to be in that job, you had to just accept there were going to be times when you had to do terrible stories like that. Nowadays we have all sorts of support in place for young journos, like mental health support and hotlines and stuff, especially being part of the News Corp conglomerate. They've got lots of things in place to give reporters support.
You talk about that support and the fact that it's been taken over by News Corp. Let's talk about that. The Gimpy Times has gone digital. What was your reaction when you were told that the paper would be no more as most people knew it?
I had to pick myself up off the floor, pretty much. It wasn't a shock in that we everyone knew it was going to happen eventually, one day.
Really, was that something that it was common knowledge that it was going to happen?
Well, it was just like across the world, like print advertising revenue and consumer revenue was in decline. Everyone was in decline. We were in decline the least of all the papers in our previous company, and with in News Corp, we were a branch of News Corp called Australian Region News Regional Media. And we were number one. We were in decline, but we were the least in decline of anyone. So we kind of thought we were immune. But coronavirus escalated things by several years. The advertising revenue just dried up because businesses were, tightening their belts, bunkering down to ride out the storm of wherever the storm is going to take us, the pandemic. So yeah, it happened a few years before anyone dreamed it would happen.
What's the reaction been, the fact that it has gone by the wayside? It's a part of Gympie history.
I think people are very sad. I certainly am. I'm still grieving. It's like my baby. It's one of my children. But really, there is nothing that anyone can do about it, and we are now still being a voice for and of the Gympie region, within a business model that will sustain us into the future, like indefinitely. This is a business model that has been designed to survive forever. So it's kind of good in a way, I guess, that we've taken that huge leap, and now we can just focus on being here for the next 152 years.
How have people embraced the change to a digital platform?
It's been very hard, very challenging, especially for our older readers, just who are used to getting their news a certain way, love their morning paper. And they're so awesome because they want to be loyal, and so many people have signed over to the digital subscription. But they really, it's been a challenge to learn how to navigate a website, for older readers some of them have never had an email address.
Wow, yeah.
So there's been a lot of trying to help people and explain it. We've actually had a road show, which was the day we had a few weeks ago. We had it at the pavilion. It was you had to register, and we had our marketing team up here, and I gave an address, and our online editor gave an address, and we had 2 sessions, had about 70 people, and we went through, had the big PowerPoint and went through and showed people where to go to get this, like the big things that they loved about the paper and they cannot find or have had trouble finding on the website, like the funerals, the death notices.
Funny you should say that. I had someone this morning only that I'd said that I'd be speaking to you, and they said that was the thing that they couldn't find was the obituaries.
Yes. So we'll be having more road shows in the future where we'll get groups in and talk people through the website. But it's funny, like it's those little things that really have bothered people, and that older generation who used to love the Saturday paper for the what we call the hatches, matches and dispatches, the classifieds. So they still want that, they want to know, because, people they know are passing away and they're not being able to find out. But it is all there. There is if you're using our app, like we have an app, which was great, but it hasn't been upgraded in a few years. It will be upgraded, but the app as it stands, if you're using the app, you won't be able to access the funeral notices. So you're better off just going in through the website, the homepage, like getting on Safari or Google and Googling the Gympie Times and logging in that way, rather than going in through your app, because you won't. And you also won't be able to see the digital edition of the paper if you're using the app, which is like the flip book.
Do people still want to see a real paper?
Absolutely. That older generation, that is how they're used to getting their news, by flipping the pages. Even if it's digitally, they still want that, rather than having to navigate their way around a website. They'll still do that because that's where you get that breaking news, that minute-by-minute news as it's unfolding. But the digital edition, which isn't like the old digital print edition, because it was basically just PDFs of the printed paper that we would then put onto our website. But this digital edition is generated using AI. So it just uses the stories that have got, in the last 24 hours, that have got the most page views, and allocates some spaces on pages.
Wow.
Plus we have the stars and a few, and the TV guide and stuff like that there, because that's, again, the TV guide. People love this, to get their TV guide off the way they're used to getting it in the paper, off of a flip book. It's
surprising though that there are some things that people really want to hang on to.
Yeah, it's just habit and change, and I totally appreciate how difficult it is to make that change. And I feel for our readers, our loyal readers, who've been loyal to the Gympie Times for their whole lives, and they've just, some of them, I know they feel like they've had the rug pulled out from underneath them.
And they've remained loyal?
A lot have, yeah. Definitely our digital subscriptions are through the roof. But they love, a lot of those older readers still want the digital edition, which is, it's definitely not as good as a way to get your news as to just get it through the website, because it's just a moment in time, and sometimes it'll, because it's done with AI, it'll put the lead story to not even be, like a very good old school news story, but it's something that got a lot of page views, like who's the best personal trainer in Gympie, vote here, like that sort of thing, so it's flawed, and we are trying to iron out wrinkles, but yeah, still getting plenty of feedback.
What's the good feedback? What are the advantages of this digital platform?
Well, the advantage is it's a sustainable model. It won't die, whereas print is dying. You're getting it as it happens. You're not waiting. Your news isn't 24 hours old. And we have a very sophisticated alert system where we if you're on our database, we send out alerts on our good stories as they break. As soon as they're published, your little email in your inbox saying, this great, a woman's just been airlifted from Rainbow Beach. So you can click straight through the story. So it's very convenient, very immediate.
Does that put more pressure on you as a crew?
It does, actually. I remember thinking when we were, because we've had a website for years. So for 3 years we were producing a paper every day, plus we were running a website and building an online audience, because we knew the day would come when that it would all be online. And I used to think, oh gee, won't our lives be easy when we don't have a paper to produce? It'll just be a website. But no, that hasn't happened. It's just more intense. It's more immediate because without focusing on the paper and that you're just focusing on the website, you want to be, even better. And I'm finding all these things that we should have been doing better, and parts of the website that need to be improved. And
so what does need to be improved?
The digital edition. I know it's probably not going to be around forever, but it'll be around for 20 years. So it needs to be just a little bit more refined, perhaps, is the best word, because like I said, it's all just AI. So it needs a bit more of an editor's touch. I don't think we realised that was the biggest feedback when we went digital and stopped print, because we actually we weren't going to have a digital edition, a flip book. We were just going to have the website. But the enormous feedback, like across Queensland, for all the sites, where's the digital edition, or at least give us something that resembles how we used to get our news. So we brought it back in, but with minimal hands-on. That's thus the AI.
Have you had to change the style of writing you do now that you are just doing a digital edition?
No, not the style. Definitely have had to make choices about what kind of stories we're writing and spending time on, because it's a smaller staff. I have a smaller team than I had before, and it's a 24-hour website, so I have to roster my team to cover 7 days, not 24 hours obviously, but as much of that, people are still on their phones and checking Facebook and the news at 11 o'clock at night, and then they start at 4 a.m. We see everything. It's all the data on who's reading what on our website is available to me.
Yep.
I get a weekly report. We see exactly when people start reading, if they're subscribers or non-subscribers, what they're reading. It's just an overload of data, actually. But for the first time in my career, I know exactly what kind of stories people want to read. It's different, I guess, when you're picking up a phone or an iPad or sitting at your desktop and clicking on a story, and it's different to a newspaper where you're just flicking through the newspaper, and if it's there, you look at the photos, but you won't probably read the story and stuff like that. So yeah, we've been able to establish what they like, and definitely crime is a big. That's the number one easy, hands down winner. Court and crime, people want to read about.
Why is that?
I don't know. I guess I really think it gets back to, it's very just that old school sort of, it's gossip sort of thing, which not to disparage anyone, but I guess, and also knowing, is there some creep living in my neighbourhood and that sort of thing, But yeah.
I know back in the days people would always tell me about, why don't you put more good news stories in? And you sort of say then, at the other end of the spectrum, crime is most popular.
I know.
How do you balance that?
Well, we always used to say we would have to do the nice, good news stories to earn our right to tell the bad stories, to be in court and going to the fatal accidents and stuff like that. Even though we always knew they weren't the stories that were getting the most eyes on them. Our other big genre, our second biggest genre of articles people want to read is council, new developments, development applications, not so much the dramas that go on in a council and the politics, but yeah, just that business news and development news. So we try and make sure there's as much of that, which is good news. It's about growth and what's going on in our town, and without being negative, because there's always that. We don't want to give a false impression that Gympie's like the crime capital of Australia or anything like that, just because we're reporting a lot more on crime. We're not really. We're just reporting less on other stuff. So yeah, but we definitely still have to commit a journalist to court if there's court happening in Gympie, which there is most days of the week. I have to commit a journalist to that.
Must be tough though. How's the team coping with the change? They're working from home now, and is that interaction the same as it used to be?
No. We are all missing each other a lot. We Zoom. We have a Google Hangout every morning, which is just like a Zoom meeting, video conferencing, and it's not the same though. So once a week, we also go and have coffees, and I'll shout coffee for the team. We'll go to Amelia's or tram cars or the decks or somewhere, and we'll have lunch and we'll have a few coffees and have a bigger meeting. It's like our daily meeting, but it's also strategising about the week ahead and what we're going to do over the weekend and that sort of thing. So that'll take us a couple of hours, but that's really our only face-to-face all week. I am trying to, got a couple of negotiations that I'm involved with to try and get us some shared office space so we can work together once a week out of a shared space, because journos really get a lot off each other, a lot of energy, and bounce ideas off each other, and how's this for a headline, or how should I frame this photo, and how should I approach this story. That is very hard because now you're not just all in a room together and you've got 10 people contributing and giving ideas. It's
the energy and the vibe.
Yeah, missing all that. Yeah, that's hard. That has been that's still hard for my guys. They're still struggling with that.
Junior journos might really suffer in this new. I know as a junior journo, you're learning from the more senior people rather than just being sent out to write a story.
No, yeah. I mean, I have a cadet straight out of uni, Maddie Mannering, and she will know nothing else probably. This is I think she had 1 month in the newsroom before we all went to work from home. She's probably though coping the best because she's not used to it. I mean, there's a lot of alternate ways to communicate, which are excruciating. They can be emails, but we have a internal Skype messaging system which is very quick and immediate, which that's how I interact with my journos, because I'm subbing all their work, sub-editing all their work at the end of the day, and I'm asking them questions and I'm saying, you should have done this a little bit different, done that. And so it's an immediate messaging system. So that's how she's getting her feedback. Or if it's really complicated, I'll just pick up the phone and have a chat. But, yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
It's a whole different new world for you. You talk about being a Gympie girl that started a cadetship. Tell us about the early days when you were a cadet.
Oh boy, well, we had the old offices in Mary Street that sort of bridged Mary Street and Nash Street, which they'd been there for decades, and they used to have the printing press there too. It wasn't there when I started, but Michael Rosa was the editor when I started. Lisa Miller was the junior reporter, so Lisa's now the anchor woman on ABC morning breakfast show. She went on to great things. She was Did she always have that spark? Yeah. No, she was awesome. She just took me under her wing, and she would get just that excitement. You'd get the sniff of a good story, and she would literally stomp her feet on the floor and just go, oh, she would just get so excited, and it really was infectious. It made, gave me that hunger for the good story. So yeah, I had her mentoring me, and Dean Gould was the A-grade reporter, we used to call them then, the senior reporter, and I think he went on to be editor of the Gold Coast Bully, and he's been all over the place. So I had two really strong, talented people in that newsroom when I started there as a cadet, and just
Which is what I was saying about that's who you learn from and who you got that, as you say, hunger for a story and the news sense.
Yeah, yep.
I remember when I was the head of a newsroom, and I had young kids that just came straight out of uni and just needed to learn and be guided. And that's where I see, a tough situation for the junior reporters. As you say, they may, that's all they're used to. But then how do they hone their art? How do they hone
Learn
their
off
skills?
people, yeah. I mean, we try and send Maddie, I'll send her to court with the court reporter, and I've sent her down to the Sunshine Coast to shadow the court reporter down there because they've got big courts and more exciting. So there are ways to still be mentoring her, and she goes to council with Scott sometimes just to see how he manages it, because he's a very good council reporter. So, and he's sort of teaching her. But yeah, so we are still doing those things, but it's not quite as good as all being closed space together and getting each other G'd up and let's do this. It's very hard to get that feeling when you're all a remote team and you're not together. So I have to really...
Which I can understand, because being involved in radio and television, there was that immediacy that now you have, and trying to beat the rival station. When I was at TUE and 2GB might have had the story before us, and we had to get it on air before they did.
Yeah, I actually love that.
Who's your competition these days?
Well, our sister papers are still competitors, because even though we do work together on some things like the Sunshine Coast Daily and Courier Mail and the Fraser Coast Chronicle, South Bonnet Times, it's just journos' instinct to beat the competition, even if they are related to you, So it's everyone, like everyone. It's news.com, it's the ABC, and we never have actually ever had that, because we were the only paper in Gympie. We never had competition, so that is kind of good. That is one.
How about radio? The fact that radio is fairly immediate, and radio was where the immediate stories were generated in the past.
Yeah, we've never competed with radio. I don't know. It's just radio news. Radio don't take their news too seriously, I don't think. I mean, I love listening to the radio. I love listening to Nugget and Owl in the morning, but their news bulletins certainly don't. They're no competition for us. We blitz them.
As far as that immediacy, though, is there more pressure to be more immediate, because radio
absolutely.
can stick it on? They can stick it on via the hour.
I can feel my heart go up as soon as I get an alert that there's been a car accident or some sort of drama. It's like, quick, we've got to get this online and get it on well, and add elements to it that no one else has got, so that they'll choose to read our article and not just the generic, whatever anyone else is putting up. So yeah, there is definitely, it's stressful, but it's exciting and satisfying when you do get it up there.
The way you saw stories is different. Back in the day, we were scanner hungry, and we'd be following whatever, and you talk about getting an alert. How do you source it? And it's one of the questions that I get asked more than any other. How do you find the news, and how do you find a lot of these big stories?
Well, Facebook today is what the bar at the local pub used to be. So we trawl Facebook. You join every Facebook group that will have you. That's a Gympie related.
Wow, that really surprises me.
Yeah, no, because you'll just get, it can just be a throwaway comment, or it can be a post. Yeah, that's one way. But we, like as you probably know, Mark, the emergency services have learnt to get around our scanners. So not that we ever had them, because they're not legal. But we have a system that is similar to a scanner.
Okay, no questions, no answers. What's the story? You talked about the guy with the tree that fell on the young fella. What's the story that's affected you most over your career? That's given you the most sense of pride, sense of just lucky to be where you are as a journo?
Okay. Probably two things. Probably not that I was sort of away having babies for a bit of this, but the campaign to stop the Traveston Dam, which was very successful and very long and very passionate, and that was a great achievement by the Gympie Times, and the campaign to fast track Section D of the Bruce Highway, which has saved, they estimate, at least 50 lives, and they're starting on that Section D now rather than in another 4 years' time. So
that was a pretty big thing, that highway. I know I covered a lot of fatal accidents myself when I was shooting for
Ghastly.
the networks.
Yep.
Then they put the divider was a really big thing to stop accidents. But this 4-lane highway, what changes has it made that you can see?
Well, it's really opened Gympie up to people who work in Brisbane or on the coast and want to live by a much more affordable home and live the good life in the country. Why would you live in crappy old Brisbane when you can live here and you're only an hour and a half down the highway, and now it's a safe, quick, unless it's Sunday afternoon and you're heading back to Brisbane or something like that. That's still horrendous. That obviously needs to be sorted out very quickly. But it's just congestion. It's not deadly like it used to be. And I'm just so glad because I've had 4 children and they've all gone off to uni, and I'm so glad that they didn't have to drive that highway because
Let's talk about the Gympie Bypass. What's it going to do for the town? I know Karoi has got that country town and little village feel again, and a lot of those towns that have been bypassed have that village feel again. What's it going to do for Gympie when it's fully bypassed?
Well, we won't have a stinky, loud, dangerous highway going through the heart of our town for a start. So we'll be able to develop those areas that have just been facing a highway, so they're not very pretty, and there might be servos and stuff, but the council will be able to, and the developers will be able to reclaim the heart of the city, which at the moment is dedicated to this highway. And I don't think any town that's been bypassed has ultimately suffered.
It was interesting.
Economically.
I was in Bulladella down in New South Wales when they just first bypassed by the 4-lane highway and stayed at a motel. The guy thought it was going to be the end of the town, and I was telling him about how towns in this area have prospered. And so that's what you think will happen here?
Yeah, definitely. It'll improve the aesthetics of Gympie no end, and it's an easy commute for people from Brisbane to come up and see us, and a safe commute. So it's win-win-win.
Do you think that Gympie will build, as you say, that
Definitely.
people will commute to, say, the Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, or wherever?
Gympie's been identified already. This is like the bypass is going to take a few years to build, obviously, but already because it's so close to that enormous growth that's happening in the southeast, like we're just outside of that, but it's a hotspot. It's one of the Queensland's 5 top regional hotspots for growth. Once the pandemic dies down and everything gets back to the new kind of normal. So there's and Bernard Salt's one person who's identified that. Another guy, I can't remember his name, but a demographer, he predicts future growth. That's their job. So Gympie's on a trajectory to growth. So we have to handle that growth and keep the Gympie that we love while that's happening. But it's definitely happening. It's happening already. Billy Mitchell was just saying he's got people ringing him up from Victoria buying property sight unseen.
Wow.
Yeah.
What changes you've covered and been across documenting the changes in Gympie over your time as a journo and now as the editor of the paper, for want of a better word. Is that, what do they call it these days?
A masthead.
Okay.
A brand.
It's interesting because people still call it the paper.
Absolutely, yeah, old habits die hard. But when we won the Hamper, well, it used to be called the Community Newspaper of the Year, and we won it again in 2018, and they had already changed that to the Community News Brand of the Year. So, you know, in keeping with where they were seeing the media going, print media. So, yeah, brand. We've always been a masthead. That's, you know, that's just for people who don't know, that's the writing of the Gimpy Times, the words that sit on the front page. That's the masthead. So, yeah, website, I don't know, actually. I don't know if there's a new term anyone's kicking around, but I just, yeah.
It'll be interesting because, as I say, paper will do for the moment, but because I know I still refer to, I'm shooting digitally and I still refer to them as tape. You know,
well, it's like some habits aren't going to die, like your inbox on your email. It used to be an actual box that sat on your desk where people put notes. So the inboxes are here to stay forever, even though they've metamorphosized into a digital inbox. So maybe people will just call it a paper. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see where that goes. But coming back to the changes that you've been documenting over the time that now that the highway has come through to Gympie and it's going to bypass Gympie in due course, what changes that really stand out to you as a journalist that's covered these things?
In the community in
whole
general?
Area, yeah, the whole area.
Well, Gympie's it's actually, it's copped a lot of flack over the years, you know, Helltown and all that. Dare we mention Helltown?
Well, yeah, let's have we lost that reputation as Helltown? Because some people embraced it, other people were horrified.
Yeah, well, that's right. Some people have used it for their own, you know, for good, like the Helltown hot rods out there on the highway. They've parlayed it into a marketing ploy. But most people are horrified by it, but I mean, that was a long time ago. That was, about 20 years ago. But
tell us about the Helltown era. How did that come about?
Well, that came about because Professor Paul Wilson, I think his name was, wrote an article for Penthouse.
Just for the articles.
Yeah, that's right. People buy it for the articles. And he must have spent some time in Gympie. I don't know what parts of Gympie he stayed in to come up with these concepts that he thought what Gympie life was like. But he wrote it and just talked about drugs and hippie communes and crime and just debauchery and rednecks and gun-toting.
Well, there had been a couple of murders in the area leading up to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if they were ahead of that article. But anyway, it went viral, to use a modern term for, you know, back then. And it has stuck with us because, you know, people who don't know Gympie, that's an easy sort of word to remember and associate with a town. But it's the Gympie that I know today is actually a very sophisticated country centre.
Do we have the best of both worlds still? And
absolutely.
Are we in danger of losing that with the influx of...
and I think the people who are making those decisions about how we develop and continue to grow are aware that people who live here don't want to lose what we've got. We don't want to be Noosa. We don't want to be the Sunshine Coast. We are Gympie and we are unique. We've got a lot of heritage value and beautiful scenery and laid-back lifestyle, and we like our nice food, and we like our nice coffee. Like you drive an hour up the highway and the coffee gets bad. Like Gympie is actually very cosmopolitan in that regard. Like it has lots of cafes and everyone does coffee well here, well, most people. That's a small thing, but it makes a big impression when people are visiting and coming to stay or just driving through, you know. It's pretty hip these days. Like it's not like it was when I was a kid, a backwater.
Well, let's talk about that when you were a kid, when it was a backwater as such.
Mm.
How did that grow on you, and how do you sort of, as a journo, sort of enter into the foray to cover what's intrinsically a backwater then?
Well, I didn't realise it was a backwater. I grew up on a farm, and I think I'd been to Brisbane once before I went to uni.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was truly a hayseed. I had no idea. I got down there and just went, what's a toga party? Like, it was such an innocent little thing off the farm. If it was a backwater, it was my backwater that I loved. Like I didn't see it as that. Like I got teased about being a hayseed, but I didn't mind. I kind of wore it like a badge of honour. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I grew up in the country, and you know, I'm glad I'm pretty innocent and naive. That'll soon change, you know, a few months at university. But yeah, the Gympie that I remember as a child was beautiful. It was, you were removed from all the crap that was going on in the world, and I do still feel that way. Like I often say to my kids, not that they're all off at uni, but I just go, Gympie, you'd have to be one of the most safest, best places in the world to live, because you're out of the fray. You're a bit removed and cocooned from the big things that are going on in the world and even in the state, but we're still sort of got our toe just over the line, you know. We're into the great southeast, so we're still connected and we're part of it, and we're benefiting from it without losing that lovely, peaceful country lifestyle.
I do look at the fact that we've got an hour to the beach, we've got an hour and a half now to Brisbane, we're an hour to the coast. We really do have so many good
got
things.
It all, yeah. And we've got our own, you know, beach community. We've got Rainbow Beach, and Fraser Island. We're on the door back. That's on our back doorstep. So, really, it's a hard place to beat.
What's the biggest change, though, over your time here that you've seen that really stands out as, wow, something you might like or something you might not like? Maybe is it like the death of Mary Street as such?
Yeah. I know that's an ongoing problem for planners and for people who own real estate in Mary Street. Yes, that's a little bit sad. When I was a little girl, we used to go and get our groceries in Mary Street, and Cullinane's department store. We used to go there, buy our knickers and stuff like that. It's very special. So yeah, Mary Street's definitely lost its vibe, and a lot, you know, there are empty businesses. I think the solution to that, dare I suggest it, is, it has been suggested by people with much better brains than me, though, is to get some government departments back in Gympie, like when they went through that phase of thinking everything has to be centralised, and they pulled out the Transport Department headquarters from Gympie, which was a big loss to our town. And I think that is the only way that they're going to create the numbers back in Mary Street, because, you know, shopping centres are just the way of the future. They're just more convenient, and so they need to get some permanent sort of occupants and government departments are perfect.
Should council also be looking more at that alfresco dining sort of?
Yeah, I think they certainly allow that to happen. Like that's happening a little bit. Amelia's does that. I've seen lots of other cafes in Mary Street. Can't remember the name of the one near the city centre stage there.
Oh, Brown Jug.
No, not Brown Jug. Oh, I think they have table outside. One, getting there. But I think that, the council is fairly lenient with letting people move their tables out onto the sidewalk because they know that that's what people want. That's definitely an idea, and that's been talked about a lot. But Gympie tends to not be very supportive of restaurants and things like that. I don't know why, but cafes, it's good, but the restaurants have come and gone over the years, and they just can't get. And they've been awesome restaurants, but they just don't get the consistent numbers to survive for some reason.
Do people head to the coast? Is that what the problem is?
Oh yeah, but they'll head to the Phoenix because they'll get a big giant steak and veggies for a pretty good price. Whereas I don't know, they just haven't embraced that sort of higher, and probably the people that have embraced that higher fine dining probably do go to the coast because you have got Noosa half an hour down the road with however many awesome restaurants. But
or the ultimate Gympie dining experience, there is always the nugget.
Oh, the nugget. I have actually eaten out there. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's one of those iconic Gympie landmarks that every truckie knows.
Yes. It's apparently a really good deal to go out there and have dinner too.
It's not too bad. Now, you were talking about the Traveston Dam. What was the big thing that really drove you to push that story?
Well, it was the swashbuckling, arrogant way it was decided at the start. Like Peter Beard flying over, going, "Oh yeah, we'll put a dam down there." No, you won't. And that you were going to lose this beautiful, fertile, picturesque valley. Well, great tracts of it, like Kandanga, I think, was completely going to go underwater, and it was just outrageous. The whole concept of it, like such a beautiful part of the world, to just and flood it, and there was so many flaws in the plan. It was going to be a very shallow dam, and it just seemed to be far too just swashbuckling approach. And
poor planning.
I think so. Yeah, like it was very sort of immediate, wasn't it? Like it was just like literally like he looked out the chopper window and went, "Oh yeah, let's put a dam down there." Like someone just said, "Oh, that might make a good spot," and I just think people just went. They were just outraged. I just couldn't believe it for a start, and then they were just outraged. And and Michael Rosa, who was the editor of the Gibby Times at the time, just made a very immediate and adamant decision that we were going to campaign against this. So, and we did, and we, it took a long time, but in the end, Peter Garrett came to the rescue.
What damage was really done to the valley, the way they bought up and just what they did?
Just absolutely nearly destroyed the economy of the valley. Like they bought up all that land and then they rented it back for not much, and a lot of it was just left to overgrow, like thriving farms and businesses, and the value, the land value in the valley just plunged, just bottomed out, because people were going, well, we're not going to buy here because there's going to be a big dam, and how close is all that construction going to be to where I buy, even if I'm not in the pathway of the dam? Just like the highways a little bit, you don't want to be near that sort of major infrastructure work going on. So yeah, it devastated the social fabric and the economy of the valley.
What was the reaction in the newsroom when the decision was made to stop the Traveston Dam?
Well, I think Arthur Gorry, who was our main reporter on that, he was actually at the Kandanga pub that day with the local campaigners, and it was just, and everyone was just like arms in the air, just cheering, and like it was like he'd won the lotto when Mr. Garrett made the announcement that he was putting an end to it. It really was quite magical.
So from then, do you think that the Mary Valley will recover and go on to become as prosperous as it was?
It's back. It's recovered it has had massive land valuation growth in the last couple of years.
Is that due to the highway?
I don't. It in part probably, but also just because people, when they realised, there was cheap land to be had, and lots of good people with projects and farms they wanted to start up, just bought back all that land and made it productive again, and people moved back into those areas, and it's just been a gradual sort of healing and a gradual and natural recovery in the land prices. But yeah, knowing that the Bruce Highway is a safe and quick and easy commute, and you can live in the beautiful Mary Valley, which is even closer to.
Well, look at the price of land not far away at Karoi. You can pay 2-3 times, and then you've got the valley, and you've got the highway these days. Tell us about the early days of the Gympie Times. It was a fairly historical document and paper that had a couple of different, as you say, mastheads and facades in the early days. After gold was discovered in Gympie. Talk about that historic part of the paper.
Well, the Gibby Times started up, I think, 5 months after James Nash discovered gold. So it was just a giant tent gold city. It would have been wild. And the 3 original owners of the Gympie Times, names escape me, dragged the printing press through the Mary Valley from Brisbane up to Gympie. Oh no, from Ipswich, I think even.
I think it was Ipswich.
Yeah. Just extraordinary to think of how they managed to do that. Very enterprising young gentleman started up the paper, and I think the first edition, it was in the middle of a flood, Mary River flood. So as they're printing off the first edition, the flood waters are actually swirling around the printer's legs, so the story goes. So, yeah, and the Gympie Times has had a few transitions over the years, changed names, and definitely changed owners a lot. And then the competition has come and gone, but it's stayed there and survived and outlived them all for 152 years, and hopefully it'll be there another 152 years.
Because there is competition again. We can't.
Oh yeah, they're Gympie today. Yep. It's.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually, good on them. There's money to be made in Gympie from print advertising. Unfortunately, the Gympie Times got scooped up in a blanket approach to what News Corp were doing with their mastheads. So
was there thought of trying to keep a paper afloat in Gympie?
By News Corp?
Well, by just locals to try and do something to keep the Gympie Times as a paper alive.
There were plenty of conversations that went on. But the brutal reality is, well, there's money there to be made now. You have from a print edition. It won't be there forever, and I don't know how long it'll be there for. So, but power to them, and I'm happy for those people who really miss the printed paper, that they do have a printed paper that they can read once a week at least. So,
is it missing something by being once a week? Rather than not trying to criticise your competition, but like the fact that it is only once a week.
Well, I think that it comes down to dollars and cents. That's why it's once a week. They're probably sussing out, if it's worth producing more than one paper a week. But I don't know. I don't know how they're going. They're not there. It's a community paper. It's not a hard newspaper. They're not up in court and they're not at the council. It's more, and it's good because that's the kind of stuff that we can't do anymore. So they're definitely filling a hole. And a couple of our journos who lost their jobs and all the big changes happened are working with them, and I'm really glad that they've got jobs. So, yeah.
That must be a hard thing to see, the fact that so many journalists across the country with these changes, and it's you hear it all the time that journalists are losing their jobs.
It's a tough time. It's a transition time for news. People will always need journalists. because the world is changing and people are sort of, not au fait with print, with digital journalism or getting their news via a website. We are definitely in a transition period. But like people like my children, they'll never they'll never pick up a newspaper. They get all their news or Facebook links. So and that generation, they get all their news off their mobile. So it will always be there. Journalism will always be there, and it's a tough time now. And jobs have been lost, and I don't know if as many jobs will ever be available again. But I hope they are.
What about investigative journalism that used to happen? I know when I was in radio, we'd scan the papers and we'd check out, because newspapers were synonymous with that investigative journalism rather, and could that fall by the wayside?
It might. It's certainly still happening at a higher level, and we certainly allow time when the things need to be. I certainly couldn't give a journalist 2 months off to just cover one story. No little regional paper could do that ever. But we have a very good investigative journalist with Scott Kovacevic, and he does not leave stones unturned when it comes to local government and things like that. So he had played a very pivotal role in the outcome of our last election with his coverage of our local council, and he's maintaining that focus.
What do you need to be a good journalist these days?
You need to be resilient. You need to be self-disciplined. I think you'd still need the same old qualities of, you need to have that gift to be a good writer or communicator and be able to tell a story and
nut one out.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's true. You need to be fast. There is no time to be self-indulgent.
You talk about the change in the council. What do you think of the fact that we've had a really sort of a broom put through council? How's the new council? What's your opinion of the new council?
I think they're great. They're authentically and strenuously trying to honour all their election commitments. We've got some really good people there who just shoot from the hip, which is, they're not frightened to say what they think, and I think they'll just be a breath of fresh air. Glenn is very committed to not letting things slide into the way things were before the March election,
there was one comment that I heard that I think I read somewhere that there was another closed council meeting, and they were worried about that. Hello, what are we going back to what?
So we have had to dig at them today on the website, because today it's not an actual general council meeting, it's a workshop, but that's something we're traditionally allowed into. But this is the second workshop they've had since the election. That's been all in committee items, so no reporters, no members of the public allowed. So we have gone, hey, we have sort of reminded them that they made promises and they need to abide by those promises of transparency, and I'm sure they've got their reasons. There's absolutely nothing for these guys to hide. They're trying to dig up all the crap that's been left, that they've been,
because they have found themselves in a financial hole.
Yeah, so if it's finances and staffing, that's usually stuff they like to tuck away behind closed doors. But it's it's all too easy for governments to do that, and it's our job to just keep going, well, no, we elected you, we're paying the rates, you need to be open and honest with us and just tell us what's going on, what are you doing in there?
And that's sort of where the importance of a local media really comes to the fore, to keep them honest.
That's right.
Do a Don Chip, keep the bastards honest.
That's exactly right. Yep. It's like, I don't know who said this either. First they took the journalists, and we don't know what happened after that. Because, you lose journalists, you won't know diddly. You'll know what the Joe Blow, who he's seen 2 YouTube videos and thinks he's an expert on something, you'll know what he thinks because he'll put it on Facebook, but you won't have professional. You need professional journalists who No, that they have to dig and be balanced and fair and accurate.
We talk about Scott with his influence on the council election. There was a campaign by the paper, and it's where we started, with you being one of the most influential people in Gympie. What is it going to drive you over the next 12 months? What sort of things do you want to see in Gympie, in both council, in the general community?
Crikey. What's going to drive me over the next 12 months? Well, I love this town. It's my hometown, and I want to see it prosper. I don't want to see it ruined by too much growth or unfettered growth, or made ugly by too much industry in the wrong places and by the wrong people running our town. So we're just, we'll just be a watchdog. We'll keep the bastards honest, and all for the betterment of Gympie and to keep our readers informed and about what's going on in their community.
Did the public get it right with the way they re-elected and put a broom through the council?
Yep.
In
Yes.
what way?
Oh, I just think there was too much. Things had just turned a bit toxic, I think, with that last council. There was too much negativity around how people were being treated, and information that was being withheld, and too much money being spent in the wrong places, and secrets and whispers and half-truths, and a bit of bullying and intimidation definitely was going on there. So definitely a refreshing feel with this new council.
Because a lot of money was spent on the Rattler. What do you think of that money? Was it well spent?
When the proposition of resurrecting the Rattler was first mooted, we were all for it. We just thought, great, it was sad to see the Rattler shut down. And we thought this will be great for Gympie, for the Murray Valley. But no one had any idea how much money it was going to cost, and it just cost too much. The thing is, the money's been spent now. So we probably need to keep it going, because otherwise that's 20 million down the drain.
Is there more money that still needs to be spent? So much money has been spent, but there more money, like where do you stop?
Well, that's true, because the tracks have to be maintained, the carriages and the engines have to be maintained, and is the number of tickets that they're selling making enough money, the way they're operating the business, is that the best way for it to be operated? I think that's all being looked at, definitely. I know that's all being looked at by the new council, and also the council is still propping up, just the operations of the Rattler. That's going to be a tough call. I'm glad that's not my decision.
Any thoughts? You were involved at one stage with David Gibson. Any thoughts of yourself with politics?
Not really.
Because I know a lot of journalists that have made the transition, that are either press secretaries, journalists. They are all aspiring politicians. Think that they can do a better job because they're interacting with them. What about yourself? Any thoughts?
No, I like the quiet life too much, Mark. I like just being at home at night, not having to go out and hand trophies over and things like that. And I do. I have a lot of time for Lou O'Brien and Tony Perrott, even though I'm not necessarily a voter for their parties, but I actually think they're both very nice and genuine gentlemen. And if I was ever going to go and work for anyone, I'd probably work for one of them. But it's not necessarily my brand of politics, but yeah.
Is it hard staying impartial? Especially in a country town.
Yeah, but you just have to. You just have to give both sides of any story, and you have to write things that people who are your mates, it's going to upset them you just, and that's probably the hardest thing about being a journo in your own town. It'd be a bit like being a copper, I reckon. It's tough. No matter what you write, you're usually going to
bloody hell,
piss somebody off.
Glenn Hartwig, really, our mayor, has a real problem. He's an ex-copper. He's a Gympie boy, and
now he's the mayor. I know. He walks a very fine line. So yeah, it's challenging, but yeah, you just got to do your job. Got to do it the best way you know how, and sometimes that means losing friends.
Have you found that for yourself?
It's happened. Yep.
Must be pretty sad. Must be pretty hard to make those, as you say, editorial decisions.
Very hard. Sleepless nights, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you've just got to do the right thing sometimes, and you just know that it's going to piss people off. Excuse my language.
So where do you see the masthead, the Gimpy Times masthead, progressing over the next 10, 20 years?
Oh, I just think we'll continue to kick goals. My personal objective is to make our digital site the best in its field, like we were with the paper. Yeah, and I think we already are. Like, we're pretty good.
Is that, like, are you performance driven?
Absolutely. And we have very clear-cut KPIs now. Now that it's just digital, this is what has to be achieved within the next 12 months, and I know we'll achieve those not easily. It's hard work. It's challenging work, especially in this new, remote working. But yeah, I like to win, so that's that's what makes me a good journalist too. You've got to be a competitive person to be in this field, and to be able to cop the knocks, you've got to enjoy the roller coaster and the battles, the daily battles.
It certainly has been that lately, and it has been a pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks for joining us over the bonnet.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.